It seems like every day there's a new AI in the news, right?
Mm.
Each one bigger and more powerful than the last.
It's been the trend, yeah. Bigger models, more data, more power.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, like, is there any limit? Are they going to keep getting bigger forever?
Well, what if I told you there's a new AI out there that's kind of turning that idea on its head?
Okay, now you've got my attention.
Why is it?
Some kind of like super compressed AI, like one of those tiny houses, but for algorithms.
Haha, not exactly. But I like how you're thinking. It's a model from Alibaba's Qwen team. It's called QwQ-32B. And get this, it's achieving performance comparable to models many times its size.
Wait, hold on. Smaller and just as powerful. How is that even possible?
The secret sauce is something called reinforcement learning, or RL. It's a different way of training AI, less about memorizing data and more about learning by doing.
So instead of just cramming information like for a test, it's more like learning how to ride a bike,
Yeah.
with trial and error and figuring things out along the way.
That's a great analogy, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. We're diving deep into how QwQ-32B uses RL to kind of punch above its weight class and what that could mean for the future of AI as a whole.
This is already sounding way more interesting than just another headline about, a bigger AI. Let's dive in. So first, just how much smaller are we talking about here? How does QwQ-32B stack up against those AI behemoths?
Well, we're talking David and Goliath levels of difference here. QwQ-32B has 32 billion parameters.
Which in itself sounds pretty massive.
Oh, it is. But compare that to DeepSeek R1, one of the leading large language models. It's got a staggering 671 billion parameters. Even though it only activates about 37 billion for a given task, that's still more than QwQ-32B uses total.
So QwQ-32B is like a tenth of the size, and it's still keeping up. This, David, is sounding pretty formidable.
Exactly. And that smaller size comes with some major advantages when you think about real-world use. Imagine trying to run a massive program on your phone. It would probably crash or take forever. QwQ-32B's smaller size makes it much more practical for running on devices you and I use every day.
Okay, that makes sense. So back to this reinforcement learning thing. It's like giving the AI a personal trainer for its brain, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. With RL, the model gets feedback on its actions and learns through trial and error, constantly improving its performance.
So how do they actually use this to train QwQ-32B? Do they just like set it loose on the internet and let it learn by doing whatever?
Not quite. They use a multi-stage process. The first stage focused on giving QwQ-32B specialized training in math and coding. Imagine teaching someone those skills, but instead of textbooks, you use algorithms that check their answers and give them feedback.
So they basically gave it a crash course in STEM.
You could say that. And then here's where it gets really interesting. In the second stage, they broadened the training. They gave QwQ-32B a taste of general knowledge and reasoning. This helped it develop a broader understanding of the world beyond just math and code.
So they started with a specific focus and then zoomed out to the bigger picture. That's fascinating. But enough with the theory. Did it actually work? What kind of results are we talking about here?
Well, remember how we talked about DeepSeek R1, that Goliath of a model? Well, they tested QwQ-32B on a bunch of benchmarks, comparing it head-to-head against DeepSeek, and even another model from OpenAI called O1 Mini.
Okay, the suspense is killing me. How did our David do against these giants?
Hold on to your hat. QwQ-32B consistently scored near or above DeepSeek R1 despite being a fraction of its size.
No way. That's like a middle schooler beating a pro athlete at their own game. Tell me more. What kind of tests did they use?
They covered a lot of bases. AME24 for math reasoning, Live Code Bench for coding skills, Live Bench for general problem solving, IFEVL for following instructions, and BFCL for logical thinking.
Okay, so they really put it through the ringer, and it held its own.
More than held its own. For example, on AME24, it scored 79.5, practically matching DeepSeek R1's score of 79.8. On LiveBench, it actually surpassed DeepSeek, scoring 73.1 compared to 71.6. And on BFCL, it blew both DeepSeek R1 and O1 Mini out of the water with a score of 66.4.
This is truly remarkable. It sounds like QwQ-32B is a real overachiever.
Absolutely. And it's not just about getting the right answers. QwQ-32B is showing something that sets it apart from most AIs.
This is where things get really interesting, right?
Yeah.
I knew there had to be more to this story.
This is where those agent capabilities we touched on earlier come into play. QwQ-32B goes beyond simply producing a correct answer. It can actually utilize tools, think critically, and adapt based on feedback. It's getting closer to how humans solve problems, not just crunching data.
Hold on. Are you saying this AI can think for itself?
Well, think might be a strong word, but it is exhibiting behavior that's much more complex than just following instructions. It can take in information, apply what it knows to new situations, and even adjust its approach if things aren't working out.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. It almost sounds like it's learning.
Exactly. And that's a big step towards developing AI that can tackle real-world problems in a more human-like way.
This is all pretty mind-blowing. Where do we go from here? What's next for QwQ-32B?
Well, here's the really exciting part. Alibaba has made QwQ-32B available with open weights, meaning anyone can access and experiment with it.
Wait, they're just giving this incredible technology away. What's the catch?
No catch. It means researchers and developers around the world can study QwQ-32B, build on it, and potentially make even bigger breakthroughs in AI and RL.
That's a game changer. It's like opening up the world of AI to anyone with a good idea.
Yeah.
And what about the Qwen team themselves? What are they planning next?
They say this is just the beginning of their exploration of RL for supercharging AI's reasoning abilities. Their goals are ambitious. Refining these techniques, tackling even more complex tasks by integrating agents, and ultimately they're shooting for the moon, artificial general intelligence.
Wow, so they're aiming for an AI that can basically do anything a human can. That's both exciting and a little bit terrifying at the same time.
It certainly raises a lot of questions. But one thing's for sure, the Qwen team has opened a door to a whole new world of AI possibilities. It's going to be fascinating to see what comes next.
This is seriously blowing my mind. I think we need a moment to process all this. We'll be right back to discuss what this all means for the future of AI. Okay, I think I've caught my breath. We've talked about how this QwQ-32B works and what it can do, but I think it's time to zoom out a little, and talk about the bigger picture here.
You're right. We've been so focused on this one model, it's easy to lose sight of why this is such a big deal for AI in general.
Exactly. So help me connect the dots here. Why should we care about a smaller AI that's just as good as the bigger ones? What does it actually mean for, people like me?
Well, for starters, it challenges a lot of assumptions we've had about AI development. For years, it's been all about bigger is better, more data, more parameters, more computing power. Like, that's the only way to make progress, right?
Right, that's been the trend. Every new AI seems like it needs its own power plant just to run.
But QwQ-32B shows us there's another way. We can get the same level of performance with smaller, more efficient models by focusing on smarter training techniques, like RL. And that has huge implications for accessibility and even sustainability.
Okay, let's unpack those one at a time. Let's start with accessibility. How does a smaller model make AI more accessible?
Think about it this way. Those giant AI models require massive amounts of computing power, specialized hardware, a ton of energy. Not everyone has access to that kind of setup. It's expensive, it's resource intensive, it's basically a barrier to entry for a lot of people.
So it's like trying to play the latest video game on a 10-year-old computer. It just won't work right.
Exactly. But smaller models like QwQ-32B could potentially run on much less powerful hardware, maybe even your laptop or phone.
Whoa. So instead of needing a supercomputer, you could be running these powerful AI programs on your everyday devices. That's kind of mind-blowing.
It is. It democratizes access to this technology, opens up a whole world of possibilities for smaller companies, researchers, even individual developers. Imagine what people could create if they didn't need a $1 million server farm just to get started.
I'm already getting ideas. Okay, so that's accessibility. What about sustainability? How does model size tie into that?
Well, training those massive AI models consumes a tremendous amount of energy. It's like running a small city just to teach the AI how to do its thing.
So it's not just about the computing power needed to run the model, but also the power it takes to train it in the first place.
Exactly. Some estimates suggest that training a single large language model can have the same carbon footprint as 5 cars over their entire lifetime. And that's just one model. Imagine the environmental impact if every new AI needed that kind of energy just to get off the ground.
Yikes, that's not great. So smaller models, less energy consumption, better for the planet. Makes sense. But are there any downsides to going smaller? I mean, you can't fit a gallon of water in a pint glass, right?
That's a great point. There are always trade-offs. Smaller models might not always be able to handle those really complex tasks that need massive amounts of data or computational horsepower. Some problems might just be too big even for a clever David.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah.
There's still a place for those big AI models.
Yeah.
But smaller ones like QwQ-32B open up a whole new range of possibilities that were basically off limits before.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to one of the big questions in AI. What does this all mean for the pursuit of artificial general intelligence that AGI everyone's talking about?
Ah, yes, AGI, that holy grail of AI research. An AI that can basically do anything a human can? Is that even really achievable? It sounds like science fiction to me.
It's definitely still a topic of debate. But the success of QwQ-32B, with its focus on RL and those impressive agent capabilities, gives us a new angle to think about. Maybe we don't need to keep building ever larger models to get closer to AGI.
So maybe instead of trying to brute force our way to AGI with bigger and bigger models, we need to work smarter, not harder.
Precisely. The Qwen team's approach suggests that maybe the key lies in smarter training methods and architecture, enabling smaller models to learn and adapt in a more human-like way. Who knows? Maybe AGI isn't about building a massive digital brain, but about building something that learns more like our own brains do.
That's a pretty mind-blowing thought. So if we connect all of this back to QwQ-32B, what are the potential real-world applications for a model like this? I mean, aside from acing math tests and writing code, of course.
The possibilities are vast. Imagine personalized education programs that adapt to each student's learning style, or virtual assistants that can help you not only schedule appointments, but also brainstorm ideas and solve problems. And think about healthcare. Imagine AI that can analyze medical images, assist with diagnoses, and even personalize treatment plans.
Wow. We're talking about AI that could potentially revolutionize entire industries. And because QwQ-32B is so efficient, these applications could be available for far more people than ever before.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so exciting. We're not just talking about incremental improvements. We're talking about a potential paradigm shift in how we think about AI and its role in our lives.
This is all pretty amazing, but I have to admit I'm also feeling a little overwhelmed. AI is evolving so rapidly, it's hard to keep up with all the changes and possibilities. Where do we even begin to make sense of it all?
I hear you. It can definitely feel like drinking from a fire hose sometimes. But I think the key is to remember that AI is ultimately a tool. It's not inherently good or bad. Its impact depends on how we choose to use it.
So it's not about the technology itself, but about our responsibility to guide its development and application in a way that benefits humanity.
Exactly. And that's where things get even more interesting, because now we're not just talking about technical challenges, we're talking about societal and ethical considerations.
Yeah.
We need to ask ourselves, what kind of future do we want to build with AI? What are our values? What are our priorities?
Those are big questions. And sounds like we need to start having these conversations now before AI gets so advanced that we can't control its impact anymore.
I couldn't agree more. We need to have open and honest discussions about the potential benefits and risks of AI. We need to ensure that it's developed and used in a way that aligns with our values and serves the best interests of humanity as a whole.
You've given us a lot to think about. I think we need to take another quick break to let all this sink in. We'll be back in a moment to wrap things up and talk about what you, our listener, can do to stay engaged with these important conversations about the future of AI.
Oh.
Okay, we're back. And man, my head is still spinning a little bit from all this talk about QwQ-32B and the future of AI. It's a lot to process.
I know what you mean. It's definitely a lot to unpack. But, even though we've covered a lot of ground today, I think it's important to remember this is really just the tip of the iceberg.
So even with everything we talked about, we're only scratching the surface of what AI can do and where it's headed.
Exactly. And I think that's both exciting and maybe a little bit daunting. We're living in a time of, incredible technological advancement, and AI is right at the forefront of that. It's already changing the world in countless ways, and we're only just beginning to see its true potential.
So where do we go from here? What can our listeners do to kind of stay informed and engaged with all this, to make sure they're not just passively, swept along by the tide of technological change?
That's the question, isn't it? And I think it's one we all need to be asking ourselves. First and foremost, I think it's important to stay curious. Read articles, listen to podcasts, watch documentaries, engage in conversations with people who are working in the field. The more you learn about AI, the better equipped you'll be to understand its impact and navigate the changes that are coming.
So it's about becoming informed citizens of this new technological landscape.
Yes, exactly. And it's not just about understanding the technology itself, but also about thinking critically about its implications. Ask questions like, how is AI being used in my industry? How might it impact my job or my community? What are the ethical considerations that we need to be thinking about?
So it's not just about being a passive consumer of technology, but about actively shaping its development and use in a way that aligns with our values.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, because AI isn't just something that's happening to us. It's something that we're actively creating. We have the power to influence its direction, to guide its development in a way that benefits humanity as a whole.
That's a powerful thought. It means we're not just along for the ride, we're actually in the driver's seat.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to engage in these conversations, to share our thoughts and ideas and to work together to ensure that AI is used for good. Because the future of AI isn't predetermined, it's something that we're actively shaping with every choice we make.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into QwQ-32B and what it tells us about the future of AI, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that AI is a tool. It's a powerful tool, yes, and one that has the potential to reshape our world in profound ways. But it's still just a tool. And like any tool, its impact depends entirely on how we choose to use it.
So it's not about fearing AI or blindly embracing it, but about understanding its potential and making conscious choices about how we want to integrate it into our lives and our society.
Precisely. And that starts with being informed, asking questions, and engaging in these conversations about the future of AI, because the future is not something that just happens to us, it's something we create.
Well, you've certainly given us a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AI. It's been an incredible journey, and I'm excited to see what the future holds.
It's been my pleasure. And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions. The future of AI is in our hands, and it's up to all of us to shape it in a way that benefits humanity and creates a better world for everyone.
And on that note, we'll sign off for today. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that's shaping our world. Until then, stay curious.